We are back in session. This matter comes before the subcommittee on a complaint filed on March 18, 2013 by Kristen Legere, who at the time was a 10-term apprentice with the Portland Sheet Metal JTC. Through May of 2013, she completed 7,640 hours of the required 8,000 OJT hours and exceeded the classroom-related instruction hours, completing the required 888 hours and then an additional 86 hours of OJT. On top of that, she's completed 30 hours of continuing education courses at the Sheet Metal Training Institute that are not mandated as part of her apprenticeship. During the term of her apprenticeship, she had no major performance deficiencies and has been advanced through each step of her program routinely. She's never been sanctioned for poor performance or poor work and was only held in term once due to the inadequate accumulation of work hours or the lack of a current CPR card, two very minor infractions. A review of her related instruction record indicates that she excelled in the classroom portion of the program and appeared to be an exemplary apprentice. Based upon her record of performance, the JTC completed the complaint from her program on or about October 15, 2013 and elevated her towards journey status. However, since the complaint was filed before her completion, the division still retains the authority to investigate. The apprentice alleges that she should remain in the program for additional education because there was a severe deficit in her field training, her OJT work as an apprentice, and that the JTC failed to make a serious and sufficient effort to mitigate or to resolve that deficit, to provide her with the necessary on-the-job training so that she could be a fully rounded journey worker. The nature of Ms. Legere's training has been the subject of substantial discussion by the JTC, the training center staff, and its instructors, and the apprentice has maintained voluminous notes and references. Many of those are included in your council materials. The written record begins approximately 3 years into her apprenticeship during the 6th term and commences with a letter dated September 16, 2010 from the apprentice to the training center director. Ms. Legere disclosed her concerns over her lack of progress in the program. She supported her concerns with allegations that her monthly work progress reports clearly shows that she was getting much more work in miscellaneous duties as opposed to the more substantive duties. During the course of her apprenticeship, the apprentice self-evaluation form portion of the monthly work progress reports consistently found the apprentice ranking herself between above average and exceptional, including her self-evaluation with respect to aptitude on the job. However, the apprentice states that those evaluations were based upon the limited work that she was given. Her evaluations are in line with the supervisor evaluations contained in the NPRs as well. We did not include all of the NPRs in your binder, but you do have a random sampling of them. During the course of our investigation, the committee made it clear that it was well aware of the nature of the work that Ms. Legere was assigned to perform, and that committee representatives had spoken with her employers to confirm the nature of her assignments. The committee believes that the assignments were appropriate for the nature of for her term in the apprenticeship program, and found it difficult to accept that an apprentice had a better understanding of the type of work and training necessary to bring an individual to journey level as opposed to the knowledge of the joint group of employers and journey workers. Ms. Legere asserts with equal conviction that her NPRs bear out the fact that she was not permitted to develop in the more complex areas of the trade. On at least 4 occasions, either the training director, the committee, or subcommittee thereof met with the apprentice to address her concern. The committee's general analysis each time was that she was being exposed to a wide variety of trade activities and that if she needed more skill building, she should take additional classes at the training center. At the conclusion of the investigation, the division's initial findings were that the JTC and its employers, by statute, and as a matter of fact, are in the best position to judge whether Ms. Legere was ready to complete the program, and that it was not our place to second-guess the committee's decisions. However, the concerns raised by Ms. Legere about her own level of proficiency and the nature of the work she was performed could not be second-guessed either. Therefore, the division recommended that the best resolution for this situation would be for both parties to agree that Ms. Legere would go and work an additional 750 hours on the job training as an apprentice, and to the extent that work was available, she would be assigned work in the field or fabrication shop, or engaged in the active fabrication and or installation of ductwork, or other areas where her OJT hours were below those outlined in the program standards. The division further recommended that at the completion of 750 hours, the committee would then reevaluate her competency and make a decision with respect to her completion. Both parties requested review by the subcommittee and the council of our findings in a timely manner. Ms. Legere takes exception with our recommendation that she be limited to 750 hours of additional work before reevaluation, and believes that she should be entitled to accrue an additional 1,000 hours of work. The apprenticeship committee appealed the division's finding and recommendations because of their belief that they have evaluated and reevaluated the entries on Ms. Legere's NPRs on a number of occasions. I was at the point where I simply summarizing the basis for the JATC's cross appeal, and I will quickly go through them. They believe that they had reevaluated her entries on her NPRs on a number of occasions and determined that the OJT, together with the related training hours, indicated adequate progress to be classified as a journey worker. The committee believes that the apprentice recorded OJT hours incorrectly and apportioned those hours in categories that did not match the actual work performed. Even assuming that the hours were properly recorded, the committee takes the position that the total OJT hours categorized in the program standards within the 4 subject matter areas are the ideal, but are certainly not mandatory for an apprentice to obtain journey worker status. The committee maintains that it is the sole province of the JATC to determine if an apprentice has achieved sufficient skills to attain journey worker status. And finally, they state that the Sheet Metal Training Institute, its instructors and employers, and even Ms. Legere in her most recent NPR self-assessment scores believe that she was progressing well towards journey worker status. So both parties have appealed the division's recommendations. The division still stands behind its recommendations, but now this matter is before this subcommittee to make a recommendation to the council. The subcommittee will be asked to make a recommendation to the full council to either A, uphold the division's recommendations, B, dismiss the division's recommendations, C, find in favor of the JATC and uphold her completion from the program, or D, uphold Ms. Legere's complaint and fashion a suitable remedy. That concludes staff's summary of the status of this matter. Unless there are any questions, Mr. Chair, you may speak with the complaint.
All right. Anything else, Kate? From Planet?
Actually, I'm Margaret Wilson, Ms. Legere's attorney, and I had something I just wanted to say real quick before she spoke to you.
Very good.
Okay. So when Ms. Legere, she came to me for some help navigating through this appeal process. And what she's asking for, as Mr. Sims said, is maybe a little bit unusual for what people come before you to ask, but she's actually asking for a little more training in certain areas, and she can explain better what those are than me, but it's basically the hands-on ductwork, fabrication, installation. These are the areas that she feels she has not gotten enough training in, such to allow her to go forth as a journeyman and perform in her field. And I'm not saying she can't do her job, but just that the apprenticeship program, as you know, is to train people, and she feels like she could use some more training. She's done great in the program. There's not a disciplinary matter at all. And so the first thing, of course, I did, being a lawyer, is I said, well, let's take a look at what the statutes say, what the regulations say. Do you have a contract? Let's take a look at all those things. So I looked at her apprenticeship registration agreement, and I saw in there that specifically, that states that it's between the employer or the employer's agent and her, and that they agreed to be bound by the apprenticeship standards. And those are promulgated, as you know, by the Oregon State Apprenticeship and Training Council. And Ms. Legere also, she said that she would perform work of the trade or craft diligently and faithfully during the period of training. And Ms. Legere has done that. She feels she has met her end of the bargain. She doesn't feel that her training agents have met their end of the bargain. She doesn't feel that she was getting equal training as some of the other apprenticeships, her peers. So then I said, well, let's see what these standards of apprenticeship say. So we looked at the standards of apprenticeship for sheet metal workers as approved by the OSATC. And in there's a section on what a JATC will do. And it says basically, but before I get to that, actually, just on the first page of these standards, it talks about how one of the standards, the principle is that an apprenticeship program was equal and full training for apprentices. And that this is set up basically to have an organized process for registering and training apprentices. So I would look through these, and there are some specific things in here that a JAT says that they are going to do. And if in these apprenticeship standards, one of the things that is supposed to happen, and Mr. Sims referenced this in his report to you also, is that apprentices will be rotated in the various processes of the skilled occupation to ensure the apprentice is trained to be a competent journey level worker. And that is actually in the statutory scheme that covers apprentices, and that's ORS chapter, I believe it's 660 that covers apprentices. Yes, 660. And there's also Oregon Administrative Rules, a rule that specifically states that. Ms. Legere doesn't feel that the rotation for her was sufficient to train her in the hands-on, more, I guess, complex parts of being a sheet metal worker. She got a lot of time spent in miscellaneous work, cleaning up after people, setting up, but she didn't get as much of the hands-on installing ductwork, or however, she'll explain that. I don't know the details of that part, because I'm a lawyer. But one of the other things that a JAT is supposed to do is monitor these training agents. And Section 7 specifically says that they will monitor the training agent to offer training opportunities on an equal basis to all employers and apprentices. And that is an Oregon Administrative Rule 839-011-0084. And that's important because the whole premise of that is an equal basis. So all of the apprentices, whether they're younger, older, male, female, white, black, whatever, they're getting equal training and the equal opportunity to succeed. And it's not going to be a preferential treatment like, oh, we like that guy, we're gonna let him go do the really fun stuff, and we're gonna make her sweep up the floor. Section 7B, same section here, also says the JATC will monitor the training agent to make sure that equal treatment and opportunity is granted for all apprentices through reasonable working and training conditions, and apply those conditions to all apprentices uniformly. And that's another Oregon Administrative Rule. It's 839-011-0200. And what Ms. Legere has raised throughout, started back in 2010, is I don't feel like I'm getting the same opportunities that some of my peers are getting. I'd like to do more of this more technical work. And she's gone to her JATC a couple times. She's gone to her union rep, her training manager, and for whatever reason, things really haven't changed for her. And so she is here today asking just that the apprenticeship standards be upheld, and that she be given equal training to her peers. So to that end, she has requested an additional 1,000 hours of training in the fabrication shops, to the extent possible that she could do more of the hand-on ductwork, fabrication, and installation. The division had recommended 750 hours. Ms. Leger said she would like 1,000 extra hours, but she would be fine accepting 750 extra hours. And she'll explain this too, I think, but she's actually working now. She's actually asking you to reduce her pay, which may sound crazy, but in her mind, it's worth it because she wants this job. She's worked hard to get her journeyman card, and she wants this career, and she wants to be very confident going forward in her career that she can do all of the skills that a sheet metal worker journeyman should be able to do. So she respectfully requests today that this subcommittee make a recommendation to the full council to either adopt the division's findings and recommendations and direct the JATC to return her to her former status as an apprentice for 750 hours, and that she be given on-the-job work to the extent possible on field job sites and ductwork fabrication and installation, or that this committee make a recommendation to the full council to return her to her former status of an apprentice for an additional 250 hours of 1,000 hours total. Thank you. And if you have any questions for me, that's great. If not, Ms. Leger is ready to address you also.
Okay. I don't think anybody have questions. All right, Ms. Leger.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Introduce yourself.
Beg your pardon?
Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Casey Leger, and I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. A lot of what I need to talk about today has to do with what's gone wrong with my training and what has not been working. But before I do that, I do want to say that there have been some really bright spots as well. There have been a handful of journeymen who have taken an interest and given me the best opportunity that they were able to learn the skills and knowledge necessary for the trade. And I think it would be unfair not to acknowledge that. But those were bright spots, and unfortunately they were rare and for the most part extremely brief. As for the remainder of my apprenticeship experience in the field, the attitude of the people whose responsibility it was to train me was for the most part offhand and disinterested as concerned my training. It became clear to me very early on that the experience I was having on the job as an apprentice was extremely different from what I saw other apprentices experiencing, and what I saw, the care that I saw given to many of the classified workers. This is people who have not made the commitment to become an apprentice in our trade, but what used to be called a pre-apprentice. I found throughout my apprenticeship and even up into my 10th term, I looked around and watched classified workers being fostered and challenged and given the opportunity to make mistakes, to correct their own mistakes, to practice what they've done wrong and then practice what they've done right. And the moments that I have had that kind of care in my apprenticeship have been precious and few. It seemed as though no one on the job, most of the time, considered my training to be their responsibility at all. My major duties through most of my apprenticeship have been to clean up behind other workers, to set up in front of other workers to do the core work, to haul out the garbage, to sort the hardware, to do repetitive assembly work, fire watch, organize gang boxes, change the seasonal color coding of the tape on the cords. I did that at 90%. That's typically work that's given to someone that's brand new. To sweep floors, and you're going to hear the word pookie from me a lot. What that actually is duct sealer. It's a little bit thinner than a putty and a lot thicker than a paint. It's applied to the ductwork with a brush, and we do a lot of it. Everybody pookies. I did so much of this sort of work that the nicknames that I earned on the job, and you know, if those of you that have construction backgrounds, you know nicknames are out there and interesting, but my nicknames were the Pookie Girl, the Pookie Queen, Princess Pocahontas, the Cleaning Woman, and the Mayor of Pookie Town. I like that one. This became, you know, I saw it very early on that this was happening, but I also felt that it was normal. When you're new, you do more of that sort of work, and it was something that I accepted. But as early as March 2008, at 50%, I was seeing this happening, and my instructor at school, Charlie Johnson, had told us in class, if you have questions, come to me and I'll tell you what's real. And so I thought, I need to know what's real. So while I was in school, I spoke with Charlie and told him about what I was seeing. And he basically told me to be patient, it's early days. The following Monday, I went back to work, and at that time, my job was to carry around a bottle of bleach water and a rag, wipe out the insides of the duct, make sure they're clean, and then make sure they're covered very carefully with plastic. This was on a pharmaceutical job site. I came back, and while I was doing that, and I'm talking about 8 hours a day, every day, 40 hours a week, I looked up in the air and I saw classified workers up on a lift installing TU boxes. At that point, I spoke to my foreman, and my foreman went to bat for me. That was actually on a Tuesday when I spoke to him. My foreman went to bat for me with my GF. I got 2 days of good work, and on Friday I was laid off. So going forward, July of August of 2010, at 75%, there was an internal email from Vancouver Roofing and Sheet Metal, which we call Versum, stating that I was working at about a 65% level, and a letter of no rehire saying not working up to a 75% level. Those documents are both in the package that I provided. That triggered a meeting with the JATC subcommittee. That was in September of 2010, and I went before the JATC and asked them and told them of my concerns. And I asked them, you know, if there was anything that they could do to help me to alter the course of my training, because at that point it was clear that things were going terribly wrong. And I described to them what I've described to you. And that JATC was not terribly helpful. Their attitude was that obviously I had done, you know, something either wrong or not right, and it's too bad, but sheet metal's not for anyone. Or I'm sorry, sheet metal is not for everyone, was their attitude. They did, because the letter of no rehire contained so many inaccuracies and so much misleading information, they rescinded that letter of no rehire, and they reprimanded the company that issued it. Now going forward to October of 2012, this was when I was at 80%, I learned from a journeyman on my job site that Arctic sheet metal foreman, Jerry Rose, had instructed the journeyman on our job site that I was to be used for support work and cleanup only, that he felt that I was too slow, and that he did not want me hanging any duct work or doing any core work. I reported that to my union rep, Willie Myers, and I reported that to Kevin Roth, the director of the apprenticeship, and that tumbled into this whole process that we're in now. I'm sorry I'm being so lengthy. I met again, that led to a meeting in November of 2012 with the JATC subcommittee, asking them to address the deficit. There was again no help to be had from that area. Since 2010, I've been in informal contact with BOLI about my situation. After there didn't seem to be any interest in following up on the situation with Arctic Sheet Metal, that is when I decided to file this complaint. I would like to say that this is not what you're seeing in my progress reports, and it has been called a clerical error, that somehow I've made a mistake in recording my hours, and I'd like to assure you that that is not the case. I've been extremely careful in recording my time. This is also not a crisis of confidence. I have absolute confidence in my own ability to do this work. I bring intelligence and a work ethic that doesn't quit. I'm strong and healthy and determined, and I'm bringing a lot to this. Where I lack confidence is where I haven't been trained. Given the same opportunities, even for a shorter period of time, I know that I can do well in this, and I'm asking for the opportunity to be a journeyman in reality and not just in name. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right. Questions from the council? Ms. Wilson?
Casey, is that what you want to go by? Are there any women on the JATC for the sheet metal? Any trades employee or employer representatives?
Not that I know of.
Are there any instructors that are women in the sheet metal program currently?
Not in the full-time, daytime instructors are all gentlemen, but I don't know if she's currently teaching now, but one of the AutoCAD instructors has been female. Other than that, I don't know of anyone.
Do you know, does the sheet metal program, do they assign a mentor to apprentices?
Oh, no.
No, so that's not something that's standard, or even...
Not that I've heard of. Nothing was ever offered to me.
And so then you first complained about this in 2010, and then in 2012? And so it sounds like in 2010, they rescinded the no rehire, right? But nothing as far as rotating you to a new employer or to other work processes?
No, I worked just in the natural course of things. I worked a lot of short jobs. I worked, in the course of 5 years, I worked for 12 different employers. I think it was in the neighborhood of 12, it could be more. So I don't know that going to a different employer would have made a difference. But no, nothing like that was offered.
You may just continue.
Go ahead.
So I'm not super familiar with the process or how sheet metal places apprentices. So do they, when you get a dispatch from a sheet metal, is it just for general work, or do they call and want some specific are you doing different types of work? I don't know what does your dispatch say, I guess.
Okay. Well, typically our apprentice out of work list is required to. They're required to take the first person on the list, and it's a dispatch in order situation. But in the event that they require something very specific, such as a certain welding certification or or something like that, they could go down the list until they find the first person that has that.
So did you primarily work in a shop situation, or were you on actual work sites?
Most of my work in the early part of my apprenticeship was all field work, all on the job site. Quite late, I think I was probably at about 80%. or about to become 80% when I went to work at the shop at Temp Control Mechanical, and I was there for about 5 months, and then I was off a while, and I can't remember if I went to the field again before, but I have spent some time in the shop. Initially, though, until that happened, I was really concerned that I was getting a really lopsided, field-oriented thing.
In the shop work, did that shop do sheet metal duct fab work?
Mhm.
Were you assigned that work in the shop?
Not terribly much. In the beginning, and I think, you know, I don't feel that that was any wrongdoing on Temp Control's part. I really feel that by the time I arrived there, I was such damaged goods that there was just really not a lot that they could do with me. You know, so I spent a lot of time actually in the package. There's photographs of this work. The fittings that go to Intel have to be sealed from the inside with something called M1, and it's, you know, you're painting. I spent many, many, many weeks doing that. I did get to do a little bit of what we call assemblies, taking the parts and banging them together into something. The more preferred work in the shop is the fabrication, where you're actually using the machines to turn a flat piece into something that has a shape. It took a long time to get back there. The last 2 months, out of probably, I'm thinking I spent maybe 9 or 10 months total in the shop, both visits. And I would say the last 2 months of my last visit to the shop, they did really begin to give me a chance back in fab, and that was amazing. That's one of those bright spots I was talking about.
So when you went to related training, though, because you had this deficit in fab work, were you assigned more fab work at the training center?
No, I did the same thing as everyone else.
Did the same thing as everyone else? What was that?
Which is, well, in the earlier part of our apprenticeship, we would learn how to do the layout for a certain thing, and then, you know, the math that goes behind it and all of that, and then we would be sent out to the shop and fabricate that in the shop. Typically what would happen at school is that I would be among the first 1 or 2 to finish the layout, get the math all right, have it checked, and get sent to the shop. And I would go to the shop, and then I would begin to really struggle because I had no experience. And I would work and work and work and work, and I'm a pretty intense person. I'm like working, and all. And the next thing you know, everyone else comes out in a herd, and then, you know, and it's quiet, and then it starts getting noisy, and then bang, 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 bang. Everyone else is banging their stuff together, and I'm still kind of going. And then everyone else is finished and gone, and I'm still out there working. That was really the experience that I had with the classroom shop work.
So, I mean, did the instructor help you?
Oh, yes.
With process? You know, I'm so sure you make
Yes.
bins in some sort of
My
order that
instructor-
makes sense, I would hope.
My instructors were very patient and very helpful with me. I had zero complaint about the school portion of my apprenticeship. They set a standard.
So how many times did you do that process from classroom to go out and make the duct work?
Oh, there was more. It seemed like there was more shop work in probably the first half to 2/3, but pretty much each time I was in school, so maybe 10 times, something like that.
Is that
15.
10 days or?
I'm having a hard time answering that.
I'm just
Usually,
curious.
the first part of, we'd be in school for a solid week. The first part of the week, a lot of that would be classroom. By, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe we're in the shop, and, you know, and I'm still there Friday after everyone else has gone home trying to finish.
You were asking for us to think about 1,000 or 750 hours here, and I just wondered if you had a number of hours that you actually got to do fab work, if that
Oh.
played into the standard requirements.
Well, the hours that I'm asking for are field hours.
Yeah.
There's no deficit in classroom.
Okay.
I have a strong disagreement with the JATC on the topic of whether classroom experience can replace field experience. I do not believe that it can.
Yeah.
So really, all I'm asking for is for the on-the-job hours to be extended.
Right. Well, I guess I'm just curious because the fabrication piece seems like that could be done in a shop or in a classroom. You know, I know installation has to be in the field, but.
Right. The fabrication part of it that is possible to do in the classroom, unfortunately, really does not bear a lot of resemblance to a real life situation. Number one, our equipment in the shop is considerably different. Funds being what they are. Our shop, it's a very nice shop, but it is not a modern working shop. The second thing that makes that difficult to really apply from one thing to the other is the fact that in a real working shop, a huge part of what makes it come together is the interplay with other people. This person's doing this part of the job, that person's doing that part of the job, someone else is running between here and there. There's communication going all over the place, and it's almost like a dance. Being, even alone in the shop, or with in a study hall situation, or what have you, it's not really the same. It can't hurt, but it's not the same.
I see. Well, thank you. I just had some basic questions that I was curious about.
So I have a question.
Mr. Carter?
So I'm looking at the recommendation number 3, from the division, and I guess my concern would be, it feels like there's no real way to guarantee that those hours are field hours, actually doing the work that you'd want to do. So even if it was 1,000 hours, we might not be able to put you in a position to kind of gain those skills. And then the other thing would be, if fabrication's still a problem in the field, would you not be reassigned? You know what I mean? If you get a chance to do that, would you not be reassigned by the foreman to do something else if you're not able to keep up with the pace? Or how would we prevent that cycle from occurring again? And at the end of a work week, the employer saying we need someone to do it faster, and that would be my concern. What assurances could we put in place or support the business manager to make sure you're getting that field experience at the?
I hope I understand what you're asking. It seems that under the circumstances, communication from a representative of the JATC, specifically to the training agent, that there's a situation here. This is not, we're not just sending you. This is not an apprentice off the list. This is an apprentice that has been cut short by the program, and that special care is required. By my reading of the standards, that is something that probably should have happened a very long time ago. That a great deal of the problem has been that the JATC has taken a completely hands-off stance on my situation. So I guess that's one answer. Because I am currently working, and I hope to continue to be working on that job, I can foresee that, I know the person that I'm working for is very supportive and is familiar with my situation. And I expect considerable support. The work that I'm doing right now, frankly, is not rocket science, but the next thing that comes up will be. And if I can get on the tool install crew and stay there, I will learn a lot of what I missed. And of course, he's retiring on the 4th of July, so that's a short-term thing. But I'm not asking to be babied for the rest of my career. I'm asking for a little bit of a leg up so that I can recoup some of what was lost in the past several years.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Reviewing, so you have 4 categories in your apprenticeship for documentation. Fabrication and assembly. You feel that you're competent in that?
No, although at during the time that the last couple of months at Temp Control in the shop, I felt that I made incredible strides. I got my hands on machines I had never touched before. I had actual help from a young journeyman and an apprentice who was far more advanced than me. I got a lot out of that. Now that ended last August, and those skills are perishable. I think if I went back into that environment, and that's not where I'm working now, but if I went back into that environment, it would take a little time to get back up to speed and then move forward from there. But I think I'm within striking distance of getting competent, but by no means competent. You know, please bear in mind that 2 months of training that I got in the shop is what a shop apprentice gets for 5 years.
Okay, and let me clarify, I guess, at least my interpretation of competent, of an apprentice being ready to be topped out. Because in all trades, in my trade, I'm a lineman, been through an apprenticeship, there is a time after you top out of you're continuing to learn without having to have a journeyman over your shoulder. So we all have that. We all experience that. Okay, now I got to have that. So the competency is that you can do these things safely and know when to stop should something to call for additional help. So to say that you're competent in being able to do that and go take on that task and do which parts you may do without somebody that would be a single person type task, and then stop when it becomes necessary to get additional, as with anybody. And the same for each of these. You've got installation and or erection, layout, and then miscellaneous, which miscellaneous is just about every standard. There are some things that you just, and it's part of every job, you know, there's some just miscellaneous work. Looking at your overall hour completion of each category, and given it's not a licensed trade, as the same as with the trade that I went through and am in, there's some requirements by Boolean, and there's no minimum requirements or requirement to complete 100% of all the hours in each classification. I think we all understand that. So and Boley requires a minimum of 50% in any one category. You can't top out with at least, or more than 50% of an imbalance. So and that's just normal. We're going to be having one light in another. That's just kind of the work. Because as long as we're getting the exposure to be competent in at the end of it, that we're comfortable as a journeyman, you can do the work safely and efficiently, and then continue to, for me, and most people I've talked to, it's a 5-year after where you go, oh wow, that's easy. So I ran the numbers here. Fab and assembly, you did 51% of the required hours of your class or your standard, which is acceptable as to be passed on. Installation and erection is 70% of the required hours in that category. 72% of layout, and then here's where the documentation of more than 320% under miscellaneous. But you still receive 95% of your overall hours in documentation of that. And what's interesting is reading through it, on your self-evaluations, you said you were doing very well, and that you were efficient and, marked yourself, what did exceptional or above average.
Can I respond to that?
It's kind of interesting, I mean, just for me.
In the material that I provided, I explained that about my self-evaluations on the NPRs. The way that I understood it, and I gather that I must have been mistaken, is that I was to evaluate myself on what I did. And what I did was that list that I gave you. If I was taking out garbage that week, if I was organizing game boxes that week, if I showed up on time, I gave myself a 10 for attendance if I was there every day. And I was there every day. But I was rating myself on what I did, not on how I felt I was doing in the overall program, and I think that gives a fairly misleading number. The other thing that I think needs to be really considered This comes down to the conditions of training. Typically, what I've seen other people experience, and I think what the average person thinks of when they think of an apprenticeship program, is that you have an apprentice and a journeyman working together, where work is being done, information is being passed, training is going on, and there's a connection, not necessarily one-to-one, but that there is a proximity with the person who's teaching you while you're learning something complex. That was so rare for me. Now, I watched other people spend 40 hours a week in that condition. For me, I would say about maybe 25% of the time I was paired with a journeyman in that kind of relationship. I always had someone who was my boss, someone who would, pull me out if I fell into a hole or something like that. But when I was given core work, most of the time it was, go over to the other side of the building and put this much of that on such and such, so and so on that thing over there. Go. And I was sent to do it by myself. I've never seen this before in my life. I've seen other people do it from across the room. You don't get to stand and watch anyone. If you're going to learn by watching, you do it while you're pooking, while you're sweeping, while you're doing something else, and you're not necessarily even close to the work that's going on. So when I did get something, it was thrown at me. Now, that work that I just described might take someone working directly with their journeyman a very short period of time, but for me, I was over there struggling by myself, going, what the heck do I do? Do I do this part first or that part first? Do I use a level for this, or do I use a plumb bob for this? I don't. And so there's so much trial and error that it might take me 10 times as long to do that. All those numbers went on my progress reports. So that experience that might have taken me, 5-6 hours, not that they would ever let me go that long, they'd take the work away and give it to someone else. But those hours are on my progress report where, if John Smith, who had actually been taught, did that same job, it would be 1 hour of his core time, 10 hours of mine for the same experience.
So in the parts where you were curious what you did first, did you go ask?
Sometimes I did. In the beginning, I would ask. I asked a lot of questions. My experience was that the moment I expressed confusion or asked a question or, gave the idea that I couldn't just jump right up and do that thing and get it done lickety-split, typically it was, oh, never mind, I'll have someone else do it. And I was back to my broom, or I was back to my cookie brush. That happened to me enough times that I realized that if I wanted any training at all, I was going to have to get over there and train myself. If I got to a point where I felt that I was going to damage material or cause a real problem by making a mistake, I would go and ask. And I would usually lose the work.
I wasn't trying to interrupt, I was passing the chair a note here. I just was curious, you were talking about, you saw other workers working with journeymen, and I know I asked you about the mentoring piece, but so when you had to go ask for help, are you asking the foreman then, the person that's pushing the crew, or did you ask other journey workers to help you, or?
Typically, it would be the journeyman that was at the head of my crew. So, for instance, just as an example, one of the crews I was on, there was usually, and this would vary depending on how much work there was and what the priorities were, but there would be one journeyman who was the lead on that floor. And during part of that time, he had 2 apprentices, and occasionally they would send another team, apprentice and journeyman. In that configuration, I would sometimes go just to whoever was closest. Actually, the more advanced apprentices often were more willing to help me than my journeymen were. But technically, I should probably go to the journeymen. Sometimes you just don't want to bother them. They've got a lot on their minds. They got things they got to do. So, but I found a lot of times that if I went to the journeyman, it really meant that someone else was going to finish that work for me.
That's what I was curious about, whether the journeyman you're going to or foreman or in a leadership position.
Typically in a leadership position, because their teams spread out all over the building, and oftentimes sometimes they will have a foreman with several leads under them. Sometimes it's a foreman who's responsible for a couple of floors, and it's just teams of journeymen and apprentices. It kind of varies how it goes out there.
Ms. Betts?
So this was what you just described. Was that typical with every employer you went to?
Most of them.
So through the chair, I have questions maybe for the division director or maybe for the JTC.
If I may, Mr. Chair, it might be appropriate to hear from the JTC at this point.
Yeah. Okay. So we'd have the JTC.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask some questions of the young lady after I hear from the JTC.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kelly True. I'm the chairman of the JTC and our training trust. Also served in the apprenticeship as well.
Committee, I'm the coordinator, long-time instructor for 14 years, full-time instructor, and the last year and a half, the training coordinator for the training center.
I'm sorry to hear your name.
Kevin Roth, R-O-T-H.
Step out. So I can get to my name. This is a good time for a transition. So, for myself, I do have a 1 o'clock appointment that I'm going to have to excuse myself. I'm going to turn the chair over to Ms. Wilson this time. She has that. Revision, please.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Okay,
Let's hear from you.
thank you. Reason obviously we're here is to respond to the complaint that was raised by Ms. Legere. And it's not our intent, or nor do we want to attempt to discredit or anything else. There's a lot of information around this. I must state that this is really uncharted territory for our apprenticeship program. For myself, I've spent over 30 years in this industry. I went through a 5-year apprenticeship program, worked for multiple employers, Portland and Eugene. I was an instructor, part-time instructor for 7 years, remain in the industry. I've been on the committee since 2007, and I've never seen anything of this nature. The only thing that I can really attest to is when I look at all of the information and try not to get distracted or too mired down into all of the details, because there's a lot of information there, is really looking at the objectivity of what it is that we're chartered to do, which is train apprentices, train journey persons in a program, fairly, equally, without bias, etc. And I look at that, and again, trying to separate the facts from all of the other distraction, if you will, the subjective from the objective elements. I'm also a father of 3 daughters. I work for a woman-owned business in the sheet metal trade presently. I care greatly about equality in the apprenticeship program and in the trades in general. I'm very passionate about this industry. And I have to honestly tell you that we seriously did hear Ms. Legere's complaint. And we have spent countless hours on this one individual complaint. And again, it's uncharted territory. for us, and to the extent that there's been an inordinate amount of time spent just on this one individual. When we look at the objective facts surrounding the situation, and again, this comes from meeting her in a subcommittee meeting and so forth to hear out the first complaint. Again, we look at progress reports, we look at GPA, we look at all the elements in the program that she's measured by. With regards to the hours on the progress reports, we didn't state it was a clerical error. What we suggested after having had her explain to us the activities that she had been doing, we felt that it was really an error in classification in many instances, not all, but in many instances, elements that are associated with installation work, whether it be putting up hangers or even installing flexes or installing different components on ductwork and so forth. They fall either under the assembly or the installation hours associated with that, and in many instances those were cited as miscellaneous items because in her own opinion they were not identified as highly technical or challenging work activities. You know, when I look at some of the other contributing factors, perhaps around her own experience, again, we've just suffered through one of the worst economic situations in the last 30 years. I served in my apprenticeship in the middle 80s, and it was very similar. And yet when I turned out from a 75% apprentice all the way to journey scale. And I was fearful about what would happen because all of a sudden, you know, I'm going to be expensive and I'm not going to be able to be employed. And so it's natural to experience that angst, if you will. And I did turn out, and I was, you know, promoted to a foreman, and then I was laid off just due to work activities. I mean, it's difficult to fathom at times, but it is also the nature of the construction industry. It's cyclical. It's not necessarily going to be full-time all the time. So it is challenging there. So with regards to the work activities, she was able to complete her apprenticeship in a 6-year period of time for 12 different employers. There was a lot of diversity there in the skill sets and the exposure that she had to different employers. That was an objective measure for us. That could be construed also, I suppose, the other way. Well, she worked for 12 employers, so must not be a very good apprentice. Well, but we look at the objective materials on the progress reports and see that no, she received good marks. So, again, the thing that we've tried not to do is to speculate. We've tried to remain objective, take emotion out of it, take all the other distracting type elements out of it. There was mention about a letter of no rehire. That was actually my first introduction to Ms. Leger, was at that site to a review committee meeting, and we demonstrated objectivity there where in many instances a letter of no rehire, when it comes from an employer, if a person has had some challenges, they may not remain in the program depending on what the charges are, the allegations are, if you will. And yet we looked back through her records and found that that very same employer 3 years previous actually had generated a letter of recommendation on behalf of Ms. Leger. And so therefore, as was stated by testimony by her counsel and herself, that that was stricken. So we ruled in her favor on that part. So the next time we had interaction with Ms. Leger was 2012, and that was essentially an outreach to Kevin with regards to complain about some of the work activities, training activities, and so forth. And in that meeting, we had we made a decision to have a subcommittee meeting to meet with Ms. Leger, and went through a very specific list of questions, wanted to understand what she'd been doing, the type of work activities, and so forth. The comment was made that the JATC was hands-off, and I can assure you that we were not hands-off in that, and the fact that we held a special subcommittee meeting just to meet with her, that's unprecedented. We've never done that. Out of that meeting, there were several comments that were made, and again, I was specifically interested in knowing and understanding if she felt she had been, prejudiced against, if you will, or if there was anything related to discrimination or gender, what have you. And she very clearly stated that, no, what's gender have to do with it? I'm not a victim here. Those were her exact words. Also asked about as far as the work opportunities, and the thing that kept coming to light was the fact that many of the fundamental activities that we do as a trade were continuously referred to as scut work or menial work, or perhaps beneath her, if you will, was the takeaway that I walked out of there with. And yet, that's our trade. That is the elements of our trade. Putting together ductwork's one element of it. There's so many facets to it. The fact that an individual is able to work for 12 employers and have a broad experience from fabrication in a shop to various field experiences to working with heavy metal shops, etc. That's far greater exposure than I had as an apprentice and many of the other apprentices. So we took that into consideration. There were several other items that came out of that, again, as we looked at the work experiences, we equated those to, well, that's actually installation work. That's a misclassification of hours. So just looking at the hours piece again. And at the end of all of that, in that subcommittee meeting, and there were several other items that we wanted to make sure and understand and rule out any potential concern over. Out of that meeting, we denied the request. There was a fully MSC motion second decision from the JETC to not grant another meeting with the full JETC to essentially rehash the same information that we'd gone through previously. So move forward a little bit further in her apprenticeship, and Ms. Legere was actually cited to come to the review committee for class fail, not taking dispatches. She was essentially not available for about a month period of time. She came before the committee. We could have at that time, as is policy, removed her from the program. Again, we looked objectively as a JETC at the individual's experience, the work history, the fact that there had not been issues with her in the past, and we elected and decided to keep her in the program and progress her further. And again, to her own words, she progressed marvelously, was her own statement. So she didn't feel that she had failed to progress, nor did we as a JETC. Therefore, we sided with keeping her in the program. So as far as, again, just some of the takeaways, the nature of our industry is what it is, and it isn't rocket science. It can be challenging, it can be technical, there's several different facets. There's also individuals in our trade that are greater skilled and less skilled, if you will. And not everyone's going to make the all-star team or the NBA or whatever the case might be. They can still be solid, valued employees and workers. That's what we saw. We saw a solid citizen that has the ability to be a good worker. And in my own experience, as it's been stated, when you turn out as a journey person, that's when the real education begins, because now all of a sudden you're looking at everything from a different set of eyes, because it is about you surviving in an industry. And it does open you up to new opportunities. You don't ever stop learning. The other observation, I guess, would be that there's been volumes written, and there's been a tremendous amount of correspondence with regards to this complaint. And what I've had to wade through as chairman is that just because it's all written doesn't necessarily mean that it's relevant or that it's even true or necessarily totally accurate. It is a perception. It is subjective. And yet we've tried to put ourselves in her shoes and understand exactly what she must be experiencing. There are different levels of training out there in the field. Different employers do things differently. We do cite, we do monitor, as was cited earlier in this morning's testimony, with meeting with our training agents, if you will. Sorry, just rambling a little bit here. The other response to the hands-off of the JETC, I would say that out of that subcommittee meeting, we walked out of there with 4 things that we said we were going to do. The first one was that we were going to meet with all of our training agents and reiterate the importance of accurate progress reports, monitoring progress reports, fulfilling their training agent obligations, We were going to relook at our monthly progress reports, if you will, to better classify and identify the miscellaneous type items. We were going to follow up with employers that had employed her, and we were also going to look at implementing a review process. In the weeks and months since that subcommittee meeting, we in February of 2013, we held a labor and management meeting, if you will, a partnering meeting with our training agents, where we went through exactly that. We laid out again the responsibilities, the progress reports, the importance of training, cross-training. The topic of rotating and apprentices come up. In Ms. Leger's case, she rotated between 12 employers. She rotated between shop and field. When I was in the apprenticeship, it was mandated that you rotated 6 months between the field and the shop, sometimes to your own detriment. You'd rotate to the shop and then there wouldn't be work there, so then you'd get laid off, which wasn't necessarily the best solution. The other thing that we did is implemented a new toll track system that for apprenticeship tracking, and Kevin can speak further to that, but it has in it a review module in the process for being able to not only monthly review apprentices in the program, but provide feedback in any instance. The other thing that we did is we did go back, we looked at our training records, our monthly progress reports, everything else, and we also, the review piece I already spoke about, that's part of the total track system. So we did do the things that we said we were going to do as a committee out of that subcommittee group. Ms. Leger commented earlier that she's confident, and I believe there is confidence there. One of the things in going back through all the records is that even to her own admission in her application to the apprenticeship program, she cited that her perhaps biggest weakness is really engaging in activities that she doesn't fully understand, and she was working on improving, taking initiative. And so that came to light through this review process. And the other thing that we've had to look at, and again, looking at the objective criteria, the measures that are in place, the hours worked, the monthly progress reports, she fulfilled classroom training, she's 3.47 GPA, finished 4th in her class of 21. When we look at that, that's objective, and that meets the criteria, the elements that quantify and qualify a person as a journey level individual, and we're obligated at that point to turn the individual out, which is exactly what we did with Ms. Leger. As a journey worker, she can solicit her own work. She does get paid more per hour, and she can still continue to pursue any continuing education opportunities that exist within our local and even other activities outside of, provided they're industry related. And those are available to her. She has been dispatched, from what I understand, was called off the list by name, by someone that knows her. And so that, in my mind, demonstrates that the individual is capable, is able, and therefore those are the reasons behind the decision that we made as a JATC, as a committee, to advance and turn her out as a journey person.
So just clarify question, was she dispatched as a journeyman or apprentice?
Journeyman.
Journeyman, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, no, not a problem.
Full-time instructor for a number of years and had her in the beginning of the apprenticeship. And she did very well. She is an AB student for the most part. 1C is all I could find in her transcripts, which was welding. So she did very well, and we've had a number of conversations in helping her. She did struggle with certain things. We're there for her to help her to succeed in as far as being a journeyman, sheet metal worker. We've offered, as we do to any of our members of our local and the training center, to audit any of the classes, to give any extra. We have a study hall day designated weekly at our facility to come in, and there's a full-time, a very experienced instructor there that has been with us for a number of years, who will help do anything, any areas that an individual has weaknesses in the fabrication, layout, any parts of it, even welding. So we've given all of the opportunities that we can think of to help her to be able to succeed and feel like as if she is earning this journeyman position. as an individual myself, I totally understand when you get close to that journeymanship. And Bob Ferguson had said it very well. There is a certain amount of hesitation as you get closer to that date because you're on your own. There's nobody looking after you. Your pay has increased and it's time to perform. And I do understand her feeling and the anxiety of fear, if that's what it is. That I think all of us, or if not all of us, do experience at some point. But that's when it starts. That's when the real learning process takes hold. Because it's do or die. And I understand that. But as a training facility, we're there to help in any way we can and have offered that help throughout the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Chair, I have a comment first and then a question. You know, first of all, I understand exactly what you're both saying, because being an apprentice, journeyman, going up through the ranks, and then as a director, I understand what you're saying. But, you know, the first thing that troubles me is that in 2012, you know, we got or 2013, there is something from an employer that states that, you know, she does well, except she lacks, you know, variety of skills or tasks. As a JATC, what would you have done, or should you have done something for that?
Well, if the letter, I think I know the letter that you're
This is,
referring to.
it sounds, it's a marker, I think it's an MPR is what it really is.
Oh, monthly progress report.
And it's from Avalon Heating.
Right.
And it says aptitude initiatives are fine, variety of tasks exposed to is lacking. Now, this is a 90% apprentice. Or is this at that point?
Can you
What
state
is
the
it?
date, please?
There is no date on it, that's what troubles
Right.
me.
Yeah.
That-
It says month 9, year 13, so I'm assuming it's September 13.
I believe that was the most recent, prior to her being dispatched,
Okay.
employer that she had worked for.
So when an employer asks you or tells you that, you know, there is some lacking, what as a JTC would you do, or a director?
This is, we've already incorporated, we've offered her the auditing, we've talked to the
Go to
employee,
different classes?
all of the other classes. So this is later. This has come after the fact of the meetings and the subcommittees with the JTC.
Okay.
Right. That was provided, if I'm not mistaken, in a supplemental packet
A
of
big
26
packet.
pages
Yeah.
Yes.
with pictures that, right, and like Avalon does specialize more in the service side type of work and a little different, you know, nature, so it's not unusual to not be fully deaf and skilled in every aspect of our industry.
If I can continue,
Sure.
then, what, have you ever extended any apprentices as far as their time in your program or hours in your program?
Not
To your
to my
knowledge,
knowledge, no.
once they've
No.
hit their required hours, OJT, they're out the door.
That's correct.
Okay, but I would hope as a committee that, you know, you're looking at the well-being of an apprentice, and if they come to you and say that they're not quite ready, I mean, and I understand the fear of an apprentice, you know, when I journeyed out, I couldn't wait, but then a lot of people are that way, they want to get out. And in our program, I talked to one of my coordinators, and that's exactly his point, he talks to the apprentice. How do they feel? Do they feel that we've done the job, that they're ready to be a journeyman? If they say no, then we do something for them, try to help them out. And I'm wondering, but you do not. You've never, in your history, I know, Kevin, you're new, because I know Dennis used to be the director.
Correct.
But Kelly, you've been there a long time. Throughout, you've never held anybody back?
To my knowledge, no one has ever been held back. I understand that once upon a time there was a form that could be filled out if a person felt unskilled or insufficiently prepared. That's not part of our standards. That's not in our apprenticeship standards. We don't really have a mechanism, if you will, to determine to move somebody back in the program. And
I didn't say back, I said help.
well, or help, excuse me. But, and again, this comes back to looking at the objective measures that are in place. And I understand if a person comes and says that, you know, I've got concerns over certain elements or what have you, this is uncharted territory for us. This has never happened. As long as I've been on the committee, this request has never been made that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
So through the chair, I have some questions as well.
Okay.
And, thanks for the context to remind everybody, and I think people are closer to this than others, about the last 5 years in construction and what opportunities there were or were not, especially for apprentices. I think that's great context, specifically to specialized skills training. So I guess the first question I have is looking at the different categories. The word ideal came up a lot. Who decides the ideal amount of hours for each of these categories? Is that a negotiation between Boley staff and your JTC, or where did we get the rates of the hours of the 8,000?
As far as the hours themselves?
Yep, the OJT. Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm not sure where that came from. I'm not sure, based on a 1,600 or 1,800 hours a year based off a 5-year program.
But as JTC, you agree that that's the appropriate indication of what people should be able to.
It used to be less. It used to be 4,000 or maybe 6,000 hours, I believe, at one time, and now it's 8,000. So we've increased it into a 5-year.
Thank you. So, how do this apprenticeship's hours completion compare to her counterparts? I mean, is it wildly different? Her 18, and I'm looking at sort of the Boley has given us a grid, but the amount of hours that she's been able to accrue for fabrication versus installation versus layout, is that the average, or is she wildly different, or is she an outlier based on other like apprenticeships at the same level?
I think based on the norm, if there is such a thing as the norm, her hours definitely in the miscellaneous category are higher than I think the majority of our apprentices. But that's classification of what she is classifying the work duties that she's doing as miscellaneous.
And that's my next question. It feels like to you, is her inability to categorize the work appropriately an indication of her lack of readiness?
I don't believe. No.
I mean, it feels like her fundamental understanding of what she's doing, to your point, and maybe it was yours, that she doesn't understand, she's not actually documenting the work she's being asked to do in the appropriate category. That almost feels like there's a lack of understanding of what it is she's doing.
It's tough, in my mind, it's tough to question what the motive is, really. If the motive is to stay in the program, then maybe that's why those hours are there. If the motive is to communicate to the JETC that she's not getting well-rounded work experiences, we looked at that. And again, when asked specifically the activities, and there's volumes, there's journals, and we've looked through that, and just as a sampling, there's a significant percentage of those work activities, sealing ductworks associated with the installation of these systems that go in. In the 26-page supplemental document that was sent after the original complaint, in there are photographs that fully capture and document and explain everything that she's been doing and working on and working in a fabrication shop around active fabrication, doing all the same things many of the same people at my employer do every day, journey person or apprentice. And again, I guess what I came to is, at some point, some industries might not be a fit for everyone, and it's unfortunate to come to that conclusion, but it could be that that's actually the case. That some of the work isn't especially technical or challenging. Some elements of it are. And not everyone gets the exact same experience. We treat people equally.
Well, the good news, though, is that this is not a question of fit in the industry. You guys are actually saying she's more ready than she believes. So that's not a question of does this person fit the industry. So how would you rank the importance of these 4 categories in terms of if you were, like 1 through 4? And so what is the most important? Is it the fabrication? And maybe that's a hard question. Versus the installation versus the layout versus miscellaneous. But in terms of judging your graduates, the folks at Journey Out, what are the most important skills that they should be able to apply as a journey person of the 4?
My own opinion would be the more diverse, the better. And if you have experience and an equal balance in all, is certainly preferred. But yet, there's individuals that spend the majority of their time even in a shop environment. I mean, we've had the same question and concern as a JETC because we concern ourselves with apprentices that spend the majority of their apprenticeship on an Intel project, for example. Tremendous, vast, different experiences and types of work that get done. But that's one employer, one owner, if you will. So we're trying to make sure that people have other work opportunities, and yet that seems to be one of the biggest jobs that's going in town. And so we as a committee have tried to make sure that people are involved in all facets, all different employers, whether it's our heavy metal shops, whether it's our light commercial shops, the McAvalon's one-person light commercial shop. We in our own company work hard to make sure we rotate apprentices between shop, field, and even in our services side of things, if you will. So I don't know that anyone would have any particular weighting above one another. The goal is to achieve the optimal hours, of course, and beyond that would be exposure in all areas so that they have experience in all areas.
Right.
Kevin, if you want to add anything to your
No,
own
absolutely. I think
experience,
out of all of the industries that we have in the building trades, the sheet metal is by far one of the most diversified. We cover a lot of stuff, a lot of areas of our work. I'm envious to a certain extent of Ms. Leisure because of her experience, 29 years in this trade, and she has experienced and worked in more companies than I have as far as exposure. She's fortunate. Not everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah, I guess the drawback there perhaps would be a jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
Correct.
Well, she's certainly got enough hours in miscellaneous. Thank you.
So just to be clear, when I asked Ms. Ledger about, rotating through, it was work processes, not employers. I mean, I get she went for 12 different employers, but the way, that I've been on a JTC since 1995, I interviewed apprentices and stuff before that. So got a lot of experience, and we're operating engineers. So we have, 360 pieces of equipment. So we're pretty darn diverse too, okay? So, and we have policies that, help us administer our standards, right? Because not everything's in the standard. You really practically have to run the program. So we have policies on how we do that. And one of those policies is, that we watch the miscellaneous category very closely. So if an apprentice is putting down too many hours in that, we're asking them, our coordinator is asking them, what are you doing? You got a lot of miscellaneous hours, look like you worked half of your month here at that. Because this is 41%, what were you doing? Maybe you're misclassifying it. Because sometimes, our guys, they got a shovel and they're shoveling out the tracks of the dozer or whatever, and they'll put that down as miscellaneous. Well, that's actually equipment maintenance, you have to do that. So, but, our stuff's pretty straightforward. So that's what I'm wondering, was there any follow-up when you saw this 41% of her hours were miscellaneous? Did you guys follow up on that?
Yes, absolutely, and that's where in the subcommittee meeting that we held and we went through and evaluated the work
When was that?
activities. That was in November 2012.
November 2012.
November
Okay.
2012. And in that meeting is where we evaluated the work activities, spoke to her about the types of work that she had been doing, and after that meeting went back as a committee and reevaluated progress reports and so forth. And that's where we came to the assessment, the conclusion, if you will, that many of the items that she was counting as miscellaneous, even if you looked at her daily diaries and reports. Yes, there were some items that fall under the miscellaneous classification, which might be, cleanup, there's, fire watch, perhaps. There's a couple items really that fall under miscellaneous. The rest of the action items that get done, whether it's layout, whether it's assembling duct, whether it's sealing duct, whether it's putting flexes in, whether it's associated with the material flow, that's all part of either the installation and erection process or the fabrication process. So again, you can discern it either way, but when we looked at the actual items that had been done, read through diaries and so forth, there were items in there that we felt were really should have been classified under the installation activity or the fabrication activity, not the miscellaneous category. And yet we didn't go back and restate ours, so it remained what she had. We didn't see any reason to go back and restate that.
Well, we correct them, right? If an
Okay.
apprentice is not filling in the right spots for what they're doing, we go, we're gonna correct them, but we don't let it go on for years either,
Okay. And that's
So,
yeah.
we're pretty proactive, and as I said, I'm trying to understand the dispatch system here a little bit better, because you have looks like these 4 categories, So we have categories too, and we want to make sure we get apprentices slotted in those categories. So we actually pull them off of a job, we'll send them to an employer that's doing work where their deficit is, right? And so if she needed to do installation and fabrication, I mean, that's what we practically would have done, you know. And for our coordinator, that's their job, right, is to watch that and then find an employer that's doing this installation or the fabrication work, and we would send them there and say, you've got too many hours in doing, you know, this layout or doing miscellaneous, now you need to go get some of this. So you guys don't do that?
No, their apprentices are not dispatched out of the JETC, they're actually dispatched out of the
Sure.
Local 16
Ours
Union
are
Hall.
too, yeah.
And
We
they're
dispatch both.
dispatched to an employer for work that needs to be done. It isn't targeted specifically.
I guess we have communication with our dispatchers and the standard rules, right?
But believe this, since I've been involved now,
Uh-huh.
and since the incident with Casey has been brought up with the miscellaneous hours, they are scrutinized now on the hours of progress reports as they come in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely an area that was overlooked prior, and we've identified that and are taking steps and measures towards that.
That's good to hear. Because I think part of what we're struggling with, and at least I am, and is the, you know, the equivalencies, right? Because we have standard performance tests that we give apprentices, and once they get from 80 to 85%, we start them at 80, not 60. So, you know, before they go above 80, 85%, they've got to accomplish a competency to move forward, right? And do you guys, you know, I guess you don't have any evaluations or anything like that in your policies and how you move apprentices or the requirements?
Sure, as far as the monthly progress reports are reviewed,
Right.
and when they go through a re-rate process, they're reviewed with the entire JETC as a monthly order of business,
Mhm.
and the re-rates are approved or not approved based on a select set of criteria. Additionally, the instructors, there's tests that are given, and there's turnout and completion activities that need to
But
occur.
where's the bar, though? So if I'm moving from one percentage, you know, from 60 to 70 or 80 to 90, don't I have to complete some things to be able to move,
Well, we definitely.
besides just hours?
Yeah, there's a series of 20 there's 23 weeks of school that they attend.
Mhm.
At the end of each week, there is an end of the week test. At the end of their first year, second year, third year, fourth year, they're apprenticed. There's an end of the year test. It's based on a pass or fail. So that's where the competency comes, whether or not they have met those milestones through their apprenticeship.
Mhm. So is there some actual, you know, fabrication work as one of those tests?
Absolutely.
Hands-on fab work in your apprenticeship training in your shop?
Yep, those are all part of end of the year. Every year they advance, that is part of an end of year test.
Because I don't think that's completely clear to us, you know, as far as, I'm not sure if it was clear to the apprentice either. A couple other things I just heard you mention, that you could have removed her after a month of absence. I mean, what was that? We don't remove apprentices because they, for some reason, can't take dispatches for a while because they have a personal issue or something like that.
Right. So what the issue was is she was cited to the review committee for failure to progress and failure to take dispatches. And there was a period of about a month. And it was not communicated that she was not going to be available. So the union hall, and I can't necessarily speak for them, but when apprentices don't take dispatches, it isn't, that's why she was referred to the site committee.
Right.
So again, we reviewed that, we listened to what it was that she had to tell us. She explained that she had to go somewhere to help move someone, there was a personal situation. It's like, okay, fine, we understand, we give you the benefit of the doubt. We didn't try to read anything more into it or less into it or suppose, but we took her on face value and said, all right, that's fine. And the response is that, which is typical of a site review when an apprentice comes before the committee, is that you may, if there's another infraction, be removed from the program. That's always a potential depending on the situation.
So that's the failure to take dispatches. What was the failure to progress? Was
That was the nature of the dispatch. It was two-part, and it was cited as failure to progress, and because not taking a dispatch, she wasn't moving, wasn't gaining any hours,
No
wasn't
work
working
hours.
towards completion.
No AJT.
All right, well, because sometimes, failure to progress has to do with work processes too, so.
Sure, right.
You didn't evaluate that at that time,
Well, we did, and again, Ms. Legere herself stated in our subcommittee meeting that I've progressed marvelously, and stated also that I'm not a victim here, and I'm not looking for special treatment. And yet, everything that I've heard today would suggest that there's special treatment being wanted by an individual that we're supposed to treat equally, and that we have objective measures that would suggest if equal is what we're to do, she meets those equal objective criteria, and therefore we're obligated to turn around.
or, so as a journey worker, do you still do cookie work?
Sometimes.
Absolutely.
What's the percentage of, I'm not joking, it's just a funny name.
Sure,
But
it is.
That's what I'm giggling at.
Yeah.
Because I'm just curious is if, she only has 18% of her hours in this fabrication, then is that normal for apprentices to graduate at? Only that 18% of fabrication work?
It's not, Kevin could probably speak to it
I
better
don't
than I.
think
Do you know the stats? and
No,
your
not
on
off
that?
the top of my head, but I don't
Okay.
think it's, like I said, we're very diversified.
Yeah.
You could work in a shop your whole apprenticeship. I mean, we've seen that happen before, or in the field and never touch the shop. It's part of our industry and what type of industry we're in.
I understand that part because, we have specialists, right? You
Right.
specialize once you're a journey worker typically, but when we have people on apprentices in our major system, we try to get them through every piece of that major so they're
Sure.
well exposed, right?
Citing personal experience, I've spent maybe 4 months in the shop in a 5-year apprenticeship, but there was also plenty of other duct that got assembled as part of fabrication on job sites. Stiffener rods, which she cited she's done, all these types of things get done in the field as part of fabrication before it gets installed. That comes back to that classification piece. So we don't have everyone in our company run our plasma tables or run our coil line items. There's specialized individuals that do those pieces of equipment. We cross-train, but not everybody does that in our company either.
Do you have a specialty? What is that?
Specialty.
Are you specialized now as a journey worker?
Well, no. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's certain people that gravitate as they turn out into other avenues that they prefer to operate in.
And I mean, I guess that gets back to my original line of questions is that, I mean, if you just looked objectively at what we have here in terms of the hours worked in the different areas, and I get that 25%, but in terms of real time, this apprentice is missing 2,000 hours, and maybe it's only 1,500, right? If you actually go through and you actually try to record what was actually done, but that's almost, that's still almost 3/4 of a year's worth of field experience in the categories that you say as a trade are very important to being, and I would, without knowing, feel that maybe more important than the miscellaneous category. So I mean, that seems to be a pretty big deficiency, and this is a quality control issue.
Completing an apprentice or having journey worker status and things like that. How, that kind of is, to me, confusing.
Complaint was filed before she was jury out. We retained jurisdiction over the complaint. So we would have the authority, and we've done this on a couple of other occasions, to request that a committee, for different reasons in other cases, but rescind their completion decision, actually direct them to take that individual back in and then seat them back in as an apprentice. So that procedurally, that's how that would work. We would simply do a rescission, which we've done for many committees, and the individual would enter back in. Procedurally then, if they were entered back in after an agreed upon number of hours we worked, we would then, the committee would then reevaluate them. That was, as I saw Ms. Wilson working towards some kind of a compromise, that's where we were trying to go. If we can't reach a compromise, it is a black and white decision here.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say, or is there?
Just one other comment I did want to make is
Okay.
that in the subcommittee meeting that we met with Ms. Legere, we did say that one potential avenue would be to go back through the entire program again. Start over as a classified, take voluntary withdrawal, have an opportunity to work through all these skills. And she said she wouldn't do it unless she could be guaranteed a spot in the apprenticeship program. And we can't guarantee that based on the pool of eligibles. So,
Doesn't sound like a solution.
well, I understand.
I mean,
And-
that's way extreme compared to what she's asked for. I mean, that's an extreme stance, I would say. So, anything else that you guys like to say? Any other questions from the committee? So I would like to have Ms. Boyd come up and maybe shed some light on a few areas. I know we're running late, I apologize, I worked everybody through lunch.
We'll have to improvise on standards review when people do need their legal lunch breaks, but we'll do that once this is resolved.
Yes, I'd like to just pound through this. So thank you for.
I have just one quick question. In going through this, do you have, or would you consider putting together something of specifically what goes into the miscellaneous hours and clarifying what goes into fabrication and assembly, that it includes some of those other things going forward that might help alleviate this?
Yes, absolutely.
And we've even clearly defined that in the past year and a half or since this has taken place with all of the other apprentices, because it was an issue. We learned a lot from this. Never happened before. There's never been history of anything like this. This was a learning experience with this. So,
Awesome, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, just a statement to you two gentlemen, don't think that these folks, and we're missing a few, have any idea about your program, or we're not here to qualify whether or not those people are apprentices or journey people, because we're not sheet metal workers. Okay, we're struggling with a couple simple facts that I think you failed to do, not you, Kevin, and possibly not you. It's just things fell through the crack. So I think that's what we're struggling with at this time. So we're not going to, in my opinion, we're not qualified to say who is and who isn't a journeyman, but I think we are qualified to look at the standards, and there's issues that you missed. So that's all I want to say.
That's it. That's why, I'm suggesting that you work together until the next council meeting and come up with a decision amongst yourself, because I think that's a better resolution than something that we may hand down for you.
Education changes, gentlemen, every day.
It does. No, and I appreciate you, correcting some deficiencies and things like that going forward. I mean, that's really important. As time goes on, we all do that. We tighten up our policies, we rethink things, we restructure stuff. But in doing so, we don't leave any apprentices in the dust, right? We give them opportunities to retool also. So, all right, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair, just procedurally, so is there a motion to table this and refer to the full council meeting?
I just had a few questions for Ms. Boyd, and then we'll see where we can go.
I'm Tamara Boyd, apprenticeship representative for the Portland Sheet Metal JATC, MA 1028.
And how long have you been doing that?
15 years.
15 years. So you were around in 2010, and when this apprentice issue first came up? Or
Yes.
Had the apprentice contacted you in 2010?
No, not in 2010, but she did contact me, I believe, in early 2013, 2012. I have notes somewhere.
And were you aware of the hours issue here, the miscellaneous?
Yes, I was.
And what did you talk to the JATC at that time, or?
I talked to the apprentice and the JTC. I advised the apprentice to watch her hours and to make sure that she was getting her hours in the proper area. And I advised the committee to make sure that she was gaining more experience in the areas that she appeared to be short in.
When you review other apprentices, are they comparable to this hour scenario, or?
I'm currently in the middle of a compliance review for the program, and I'm definitely looking for that. I've not completely analyzed that data, but I've not seen anything with such disparity. But I'm not done yet. But this is unusual.
When do you think you'd be done with the compliance review then?
Hopefully this week it should be done.
So before the council meeting?
Yeah.
That would be possible?
Oh, yeah.
2010 when the subcommittee of the JATC talked to the apprentice and they were talking about the where those hours belong or whatever. Were you comfortable with that there were some disparities between the standards of where something would fall and where they were recorded on the NPRs?
I was not aware of this in 2010. I do caution my committees to watch the work processes because there is the 50% rule. I think that's very important, and I like my programs to look at that as people are going through the program so that they're aware what's happening. Okay.
Anybody else have questions for Tamara? Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess at this time, if Ms. Lazare would like to come up and do any cleanup or rebut or add anything, you have that opportunity now if you'd like to take it. No, I was asking if, do you have, I don't know.
No, I thought he wanted to ask.
I know John
I
had
did, but
follow-up.
only if she wants to come up.
Yeah, but it's also your opportunity to add or clarify anything that you heard so far. So state your name again.
Hi, I'm Casey Leger.
Through the chair, Casey, do you want to be a journeyman sheet metal worker?
Yes, I do, very much.
But you feel you're not competent at this time to be one?
That's correct.
And you know how your industry works as far as your JATC in relation to your employers?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
What is, and I think Mr. Gardner brought it up earlier, you know, we can do things here for this committee, but I don't think we have the legal right to, and I don't think the JATC does either, to mandate to an employer to get you certain types of training in the industry. I know I don't through my committee for the carpenters. So if we did something here, how do we know that it's going to happen out there in the industry? In your opinion, how do you know if you're going to work for an employer to get the training that you feel you lack and it's only going to take 750 hours or 1,000 hours? If you stay with this one employer, maybe instead of, what is it, Pokian or Pukian?
Pookie.
Okay, instead of doing that, maybe they got you bending metal for
Yeah.
time you're employed, but is that going to cover what you think you lack to be a journey person? You see, that's the struggle that I'm having with, is that I understand that because when a lot of apprentices, you know, get to their 4th year or whatever term they determine in their apprenticeship program, they get this apprehension. They don't want to go out and compete and be on the list with the journey people. Okay, but on the other hand, we got a lot of apprentices that want to get out faster than what we want them to get out. Because, in my opinion, a good apprenticeship is probably like a 10-year program, because there's no way that any apprentice can learn everything about their industry. They're learning all the time. And so when you get to that journey stage, after 4 or 5 years, there's a real fear, because now you know there's things you've never done, probably never will do. So my question is how do we know that in your mind, can you get that training that you think you lack?
Well, I don't think that I can guarantee that any more than any of you can, but I feel that it will give me a fighting chance. It'll get me out there, you know, still under the shelter of the apprenticeship with a chance to make it happen. I know that if the request is denied, that there's really no chance unless an employer chooses to give me that extra care as a journeyman, that they choose to pay me as a journeyman but treat me as an apprentice. And they might do that, but I can't say. I'm sorry, there's another thought and it's getting away from me. Oh, I did want to make the point. It seems like my situation is very different than most of the apprentices that I've gone to school with and most of the journeymen that I work with every day, in that I'm married to someone who makes a good income. I can afford to have time off, much more so. I have no children. My cars are paid for. So this idea that what this is about is that I'm afraid to go out and compete, that's not what motivates me here at all. What motivates me is that that the agreement that was made between myself and the JTC and the training agents has not been honored. And I feel that in this way, with what BOLI has recommended, I think that's, some corner of that can be honored, and it will give me an opportunity to make of it what I can. If you give me those 6 months and I can't make it, I didn't make it.
Thank you.
That's fair.
Well, it sounds to me like you've already made it. You graduated, right? So
Well-
I guess that's, we have, like I said, a lot of different pieces of equipment. I'm not a sheet metal worker, so I don't really know that. But I know our industry, we have 5 majors, so our programs are divided up even. So, and we have apprentices, and we know the kind of orders that our employers want people, the journeymen, to be skilled at. And apprentices can go through our program and not really cover all the bases, even in one major. So, and we just counseled a young man yesterday that, he's just about to journey out, but, I want to see him come back and do journeyman upgrade and get some focused training on one certain aspect. And he'll really get the benefit of that through journeyman upgrade, where he wouldn't get it as apprentice, as an apprentice necessarily, right? Because it's not as focused of training in the apprenticeship program. So I guess, it sounds like the sheet metal offers journeyman upgrade and additional classes. So why wouldn't that be a course to take it in the fabrication? I know you wouldn't be installation necessarily, but when I listened to you earlier, it sounded like you struggled with the actual fab work and the machine and, to do that.
I feel that my last couple of months in the shop at Temp Control helped me a lot with my fabrication, certainly much more than even more time in the school shop could have done.
Okay.
It's very possible that as I go forward, I may end up being a field journeyman. That's where I've spent most of my time. It's where I'm the most comfortable. I'm fine with that. And if this next month ends up being about field installation, that would really be the better solution for me, because that's the one thing they can't teach me in a classroom. So, but I don't expect to be an expert at everything.
Sure.
I just feel that I should be able to walk onto a job site, be handed a print, walk into the area that print covers and say, okay, we need to do this and this and this. I'm not there yet.
Well, it sounds like a foreman.
No, this is what our journeymen do every day.
Okay.
The foreman hands in the print, but the journeyman takes that print and turns it into something, up in the air. And I'm not at a place where I can do that. I simply haven't been exposed to enough of it.
So what, you were requested by name by the employer you're working for now?
Yes.
And what type of work do they have you doing?
Right now, what I'm doing is it's called filter crew. I'm working in a clean room environment, and we're in the clean room. There are please bear with me because it's only been a few days, but I'm learning this. There are what they call RAGs, return air grills, and then there are the HEPA filters. And as they change the usage of a clean room, they reconfigure where you have return air grills and where you have HEPA filters. And so it's basically sort of like doing a paint by numbers. Your print tells you I want this here, here, and here, and here, and you figure out how to move them. And it's challenging physically because you're working among a lot of obstacles. But it's, like I said before, it's really it's not rocket science. That environment, and I think the reason that I was called by name is that the Intel environment They want people that are detail-oriented. They want people who are very respectful of safety, extremely respectful of the rules. It's a very rules-heavy environment. And this journeyman, or this foreman that I had worked for previously knew me to be that type of a person. I do not believe I was called for my skills. I was called for who I am.
Well, but they have faith in your skills.
Yeah,
Yeah, those are skills.
learning skills.
that's what that is.
But they were not taught. Those
Yeah,
are things
but
I
you've
brought
got a
with
new
me.
challenge, so you're doing a new,
Yeah.
this is an installation task, right?
Not exactly. Sort of.
I would say changing
It's just
filters
shuffling
and-
stuff around. I mean, it's just shuffling the cards. But the next step after that, if I move from the, and there's a good possibility that I would be moving from the filter crew onto a tool install crew, and that is the installation of duct. It's small duct work mostly, but that would be an opportunity to learn skills that I missed before. The converse of that, and this is why I would rather do it as an apprentice than as a journeyman, is that I will be walking in there without those skills. And as an apprentice, I think that, okay, you're an apprentice and you haven't done this before, this is something that we need to expose you to. That would be the attitude I would run into. Whereas if I walk in as a journeyman, they're looking at me like, what do you mean you're a journeyman and you can't do a transition?
Well, isn't this gonna be with the same employer, is that
Yes.
right? So they know you're a new entry-level journeyman, I mean, that's what we call apprentices, entry-level
Yes.
journeyman, right? So, I mean, have you asked them if they're gonna be willing to transfer you into the small duct installation work after your job
It's-
here is done?
That's what the person who actually called me, that's what he tells me is likely to be the progression. I have a lot of concern that, walking into that different environment as a journeyman, I'm likely to crash and burn, and they could just go, wow, this, we can't fix
That's
this.
what I'm trying to get at, does he understand that you need some instruction in this?
I think he
Well,
does.
and you were dispatched as a journey level to this employer, and that employer, that person is telling you that that's the next step. So, to me, it's saying that they're willing to do that. I don't see a disconnect.
Yeah.
He is willing to do that. He will be retiring on the 4th of July. I don't know that the rest of the company, and if I can make enough of an impression on whoever is going to be taking over, and I don't know who that is, then, there is an opportunity there. But I think that the opportunity is better as an apprentice than it would be as a journeyman.
And you also have this study hall that they talked about, where you could go in and tap into that instructor with the knowledge of all these different things and really query and get yourself up to speed so that you have more comfort going in.
And I actually, they are mistaken. I have taken advantage of the study hall.
But in this particular case, I mean, you have a very specific goal and a very specific thing that you see, that this is to me, the perfect opportunity to go in there, take advantage of that, and get the confidence you need to go in there.
I would agree with that.
I mean, because I think, in my experience, employers know that you haven't done everything and you don't have thousands of hours of, seat time in my world, that you need to have the experience and the opportunity to do that. And, so if you have an employer that's willing to work with you to get some of this installation, I mean, I think that sounds like a perfect scenario here. So, because when I did get back to you here, if you and the